dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my foes. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
Yo, what's good, original crew? It's your boy DJ New Kid, your girl.
Sierra Nicole.
We're back on the channel with another Mr. Ballen reaction for y'all today. We got top 3 places you can't go, but people went anyways. If I can't go, trust me, I'ma listen. I don't care what situation it is.
Be a rebel.
You said what?
I said you ain't gonna be a rebel and just do your own
Hell
thing.
no, Mama ain't raised no fool. Sometimes you can tiptoe off the porch and come right back on that beat.
Okay.
You ain't gotta jump off the porch and, you know.
I feel you.
Everybody want to hop off the porch and go just run out in the streets. Oh, man, sometimes you just need tiptoe. Look. Y'all look crazy. Come back on the porch, man. So with that being said, make sure y'all check out the links in the description box.
Down below.
You already know where to go, man. You want the first part, you got to do is check out down below. Also, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you lock it in with a thumbs up. Y'all know we take notes. Where my notepad? Can you get my notepad? You put it all the way up there. You just had it. I take notes. Feel free to comment your theory in the comment section down below to each thing. If you feel like, you know what I'm saying?
I feel you.
But don't discredit an opinion if you don't have one to combat it.
Okay. I got you.
All right. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's check it out. Let's see what it's about, man. We out here together.
Today, we're going to learn about 3 places that you're not supposed to go and people who went there anyways. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right channel because that's all we do and we upload 3 or 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please offer the like button a scoop of their favorite ice cream, but make sure you sneak an elephant laxative into it first. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. On December 20th, 2019, 14-year-old Harley Dilly was on his way to school. It was the last day.
I'm sorry.
You're too busy dancing.
I know, 14. What year?
2019.
Damn.
December 20th, 2019, 14-year-old Harley Dilly was on his way to school. It was the last day before vacation, and he was furious with his parents. The night before, he had gotten into a huge fight with them, and as punishment, they had confiscated his phone. That afternoon, Harley did not come home. So his parents called the school to say, hey, have you seen our son? And they said, well, we know he was here today, but we don't know where he went after that. So the parents called some of Harley's friends, and none of his friends had seen him after school. His parents were worried, but they had seen this kind of behavior before. When Harley got really mad, he had a history of running away from the house and staying out overnight. He usually crashed with some friend, and they would cover for him, or sometimes he would even sleep in abandoned buildings. And so that day, the police were not called. The next day, when Harley still didn't show up, the parents started to get a little bit more worried, and because their son didn't even have his phone, they had no way of getting in touch with him. And so they finally said, we gotta go to the police. And so the police launched a formal search for him, and right away, there was no leads. Nobody knew where he was. Weeks went by, and the family was putting up posters all over town, telling their son that you're not in trouble, please come home, and everybody in the community is out there looking for Harley, but there was just no sign of him. Finally, almost a month after he had gone missing, the police received a tip. The house across the street from Harley's house was a vacant home because the owners were actually renovating the property, so they weren't living there. But they had cameras set up on the outside, and one of their cameras, when they reviewed it, picked up Harley walking towards their property on the day he went missing. And so the police show up at this property, the owners show up, they give them the key, the police go inside, they're yelling for Harley, they check all the doors and all the windows and everything is locked, there's no sign of a break-in. They go upstairs and in one of the bedrooms they see there's a jacket lying on the ground and it would turn out to be Harley's. It was the same one he had on when he went missing. And next to the jacket on the ground is this weird metal plate. And so after seeing this, the police believe Harley must be up on the second floor somewhere. He must have been hiding out in this vacant house the whole time. They don't know how he got in, but clearly this is his stuff. And so they start yelling for him and walking around the second floor, and it's silence. There's no sign of Harley. And so they go back in the room where his jacket and this plate is, and they look up on the wall, and pretty high up, there's a hole in the wall. And it looks to be about the same size as this metal plate. And they realize this plate is actually a vent cover, and that is a vent. Suddenly, police believe this could be a lot more sinister, that perhaps someone had harmed Harley and then taken evidence and stuffed it into a vent inside of a vacant house. So one of the officers gets a stool, they put it in front of this vent, they climb on top, and they reach in to feel around for more evidence. And as soon as they reach in, they touch something and they pull their hand back out. And they say, there's a person in there. And it would turn out the person inside of there was Harley, and he was deceased. Although no one knows exactly what happened to Harley, the leading theory is he climbed onto the roof of this vacant home on the day he went missing. And he looked down the chimney. There was no cap on it. And from his perspective, it looked like he'd be able to fit all the way down to the bottom. But what he didn't know was this chimney was wider at the top, and then as it went down, it got narrower and narrower and narrower. And in fact, the most narrow section towards the lower half, he never could have got through. This was an impossible thing he was trying to do. But regardless, he went in feet first, and he began making his way down, and then about the halfway point, he started to get stuck. And he believed it was because of his big, bulky jacket. And as it happened, he was right in front of this hole in the wall, which was the vent, and so he managed to punch the metal plate off of the vent. He got his jacket off, and he forced it through this hole, thinking that would give him a little bit more room. And it did. He began to sink a little bit further, and then he decides to put both arms over his head to try to make himself as narrow as possible. And it works. He starts to move down, but at some point, he gets completely stuck. And he's struggling to breathe because the chimney is tight in his chest, and he's got his arms over his head, and he's starting to panic, and he lets out a scream. But as soon as he does that, the air coming out of his lungs causes his chest to compress, and he sinks just a little bit lower into that tight section of the chimney. And as soon as he comes to a stop, he tries to breathe back in again, but his chest can no longer expand to its full size, so he can't get a full breath. And so over and over and over again, as he's screaming and yelling for help, he's compressing his chest and sinking farther and farther into this inescapable trap until he reaches a point where he cannot go any lower. And his chest is crushed by the chimney. He can barely catch his breath. His arms are stuck over his head and his feet are dangling off the ground. And that is how he would stay until he suffocated to death.
So sad.
Do you believe he suffocated to death, or you think something happened to him?
I think that that's what happened.
Yeah, part of the story is true. I don't agree with like some of the scenario. I think he had already took his jacket off before he even went in the chimney, because they found the chimney just laying there.
They found the chimney.
I mean, they found the jacket just laying there on the ground, in a room. I think he took his jacket off. How do you think
he got the? Well,
you know they said they never had found access into the house.
It's like there was no.
But how's the jacket just laying like fully?
Because I think that's how it happened. I think you overthinking like the jacket thing, but I do feel like that was the cause.
Yeah. I agree with the cause. Like that's sad.
Yeah,
that's sad as hell. And then it was just right across the street.
Right across the street, yeah.
And where he was located inside of it, even if he screamed or whatever, nobody was gonna be able to hear him. Of the type of space it was. But he came down feet first. Mm-hmm. When did he twist him in the chimney to be facing head first? You get what I'm saying?
He was never.
Because he had to take off his jacket and push his jacket through for it to even get inside. So he had to somehow be. You get what I'm saying?
Before he got to the narrow part, he realized like, okay, this is getting tight. So before I get too down where I can't do anything, let me go ahead and take my jacket off.
But I'm saying, when did he get twisted, turned around? Because if I'm going down feet first, my feet should be at this end, and my head should be at that end. That's what I'm saying. No, his head was at the end where it comes out into the house. If you get what I'm saying.
It wasn't.
Yes, it was. Because that's how you get the jacket into the house. You have to push the jacket through. Okay. You ain't get my logic.
I don't know. You kind of lost me.
So you going down.
I get what you're saying.
This is I'm not saying
I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm saying what part did he turn to be able to push his jacket through out the hole? That's all I'm saying. I don't know if you're understanding my logic.
I don't think I am, but
I'll explain it afterwards, like more better. But
because the hole that he pushed it through was the hole that was in the wall that the metal piece was in.
Yeah.
Okay, it don't matter. I think you're getting too caught up on that.
No,
but
no.
What I was about to say before you move on to the next one, it's super sad because I'm like, how long? I know he was there for a month before they found him, but I'm like, how long, like, the suffering of just, being there before, that's, like, super sad.
Yeah,
but,
and
then just being right across the street.
Was he able to scream out at all, or was he just, it probably was actually fast, because he couldn't breathe in. So, So, I want to, because he was in there for a month, and I wonder what prompted them to even try to check their cameras a month later to be able to give that tip.
Probably just because, maybe it's right across the street. So let me see if he, at any point, maybe had walked down the street, came home, was in the facility.
But y'all could have been peeked them cameras, though.
I mean, I get that, but I feel like some people, some may spark somebody. It's like, let me check this, or let me do this.
Yeah,
some people don't think right off that. I hate that it did take a month, but
but that's the only part of it.
Regardless of the fact, I don't know. It's just
I don't think nobody did anything to him. I'm just trying to fit.
No.
My mom be stuck on on crazy scenarios, like when did he get twisted around or something like that. That's just how my mom get twisted up sometimes. But I think this just was a horrible mistake that happened, and he shouldn't have went into the chimney. And I feel there should be something up there to even be able to protect people from going inside chimneys. But I don't know how chimneys and stuff work. I don't have one, but
In 2002, Sean Doyle was a 25-year-old bartender who worked at a restaurant.
Hold on, how the fuck he even get on the roof as a little kid?
He's 14. You can climb up.
Well, yeah, he is 14. Damn, he was a little too big to even be going through it. Yeah, you're right.
In 2002, Sean Doyle was a 25-year-old bartender who worked at a restaurant in Lower Manhattan in New York City. His regulars described him as a little guy who was very cordial and very friendly. He lived not that far away from the restaurant in an apartment building with his sister Shannon and his dog Emmett. And just down the hall from him was his good friend, 47-year-old Michael Wright. Sean and Michael made an odd pair, not only because of their age difference, but because Michael was actually a huge guy, so the size differential was massive. But they were best buds and they hung out all the time. On December 13th of that year, Sean had just worked a double. He got back to the apartment building and he was ready to cut loose for the weekend. And as soon as he got onto his floor, he looked down the hall and he saw Michael and his girlfriend getting ready to go out for the night. And they flagged him down and said, "Hey, you should join us." And Sean said, "Perfect. This is exactly what I wanted." And so he ran in his apartment, he dropped his stuff, he changed, came back out, and they headed to the bars. That night, the trio had a great time bar hopping all over Lower Manhattan. And then sometime in the early morning hours of December 14th, they decided that they'd had enough to drink and it was time to go home. Now, where they were was only a couple blocks away from their apartment building, so they decided they would just walk. And so they get out on the street and they start walking home, and at some point, Michael gets the impression that Sean is hitting on his girlfriend. It's unclear what gave him this impression, but apparently he really believed it, because as soon as he saw it, he launched an attack on Sean and started just beating him up in the middle of the street. Witnesses who lived in the apartments that were overlooking the street would later say they heard a scuffle outside and they looked out the window and they saw a big guy wailing on a little guy. Then, with the whole neighborhood watching, the big guy, Michael, picked up the little guy, Sean, and shoved him. And Sean flew backwards and he ran into this plastic chimney that was over this manhole. It was there to let steam escape and also to make sure nobody went in the manhole. But when Sean rammed into it, it toppled over, exposing the manhole, and Sean fell 18 feet to the bottom of it. As soon as he landed, witnesses would say they heard a blood-curdling scream. It would turn out the hole he had fallen into was filled with boiling water and scalding steam because of a nearby steam main leak. When police and paramedics arrived, they heard Sean screaming from the hole, and so they ran over and they get to the edge of the hole and they try to look down to get a look at Sean, but they're hit with the steam and it's so hot, so they had to back up. And finally the steam clears and they get a look at Sean, and he's just standing in the middle of this hole up to his waist in water. He's obviously in excruciating pain. And he's just reaching up for them, his back is arched, and he's pleading with them to get him out of this hole. They turned off the steam main and they tried to lower something down to him to try to pull him out, but his body was starting to shut down and he couldn't grab on. So they considered sending a person down to try to put a harness on him and try to get him out that way, but even with the steam main off, it was over 300 degrees inside of this hole, so no one could go down there. And so knowing they could not help him, police, paramedics, and other onlookers just had to walk around the outside of this hole with their hands on their heads, listening to Sean's desperate pleas for help. And finally, after 10 minutes of agony, it went quiet. It would take 4 more hours for that hole to cool off enough that they could send someone down to retrieve his body. Judy Melinek, the famous New York medical examiner who did Sean's autopsy, wrote in her book, Working Stiff, that Sean's death was the worst one she had ever seen in her entire career. His fight with Michael and his fall into the hole did not contribute to his death. His actual cause of death was being steamed alive. But what makes this the worst death ever is that steam burns, no matter how severe, do not destroy nerve endings the way flames do. Which means Sean would have felt everything. Michael was charged with second-degree murder. However, it's not listed online whether or not he was found guilty or what his sentence was.
Jeez.
Wow, to go out like that to a friend all over a...
Jeez.
And 9 times out of 10, this ain't the first time he ever been around your girl. Especially for you to be comfortable enough to tell him, hey, come out and hang with us.
Yeah, but the main contributing factor was he had alcohol in his system. So
and both of y'all had alcohol.
Yeah, so it's like one of those.
You drunk and enraged and automatically thinking somebody's doing something more than what they possibly is doing.
Yeah.
But he's also drunk and probably, because some people, like, alcohol causes different moods. Some people get way more flirty. Some people get way more aggressive. Some people get quiet and shit. I know how I am. I'm a very, when I drink, I'm very to myself, quiet, chill, and I like to just go into a corner and be by myself. I don't like to talk to people. I just, you know what I'm saying? I'm a downer person on liquor. You a little different. I know how you is on liquor.
Yeah.
You just like, but everybody's not the same, because even in college, I had homies, when they drink, I'll just be like, bro, I cannot like be around you when you drink. I'm not, because for one,
but
I had one homie, like, every time he got drunk, he was always fighting.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, dude, bro, like, chill down. You know, like, so you got some...
Go ahead.
No, I was just finna say, you got some dude who just, to be real, they get in a jealous rage.
Yeah, and honestly, it would have been like, you know, a scuffle, whatever, and probably apology the next day. This was like super, it was like a... Overboard, but it was like an accident. Like, he wasn't trying to push him in the thing.
Yeah.
It just so happened he pushed him. It was too hard. This situation happened. It's super unfortunate.
And I wonder, like the sizes,
dang.
like how bigger of a guy was the Michael dude was to Sean.
Yeah.
Because he was in his 40s, right? I can't remember Michael. Yeah. I was trying to write it down, but I got to 25.
Yeah.
On Sean.
Yeah, regardless though, it's just like dang. You know what I'm saying? It's that's sad. That's super sad. And the fact that the agony that I know that he went through, because he felt everything, and the fact that no one could do anything, that's a lot. That's a lot of, oh my gosh. I can only imagine. And
I've heard like these joints. I heard these steam joints just be out in the streets and you can like walk.
Yeah.
Like, to be honest, that's unsafe in itself, because a situation like this can happen, and like some cities just need to be properly well, you know what I'm saying, dealt with in other way. I don't know, never been to New York. Like, it ain't one of my. It used to be one of my spots I wanted to go, but this is a very sad, unfortunate situation, especially you lost your life for having a scuffle. A drunken scuffle that might not even been really that serious with a friend. Because, to be honest, if y'all were sober, both individuals sober, and y'all just had been hanging out, I don't believe it would have even went to this far. Yeah. Where y'all probably even had a scuffle or even a mindset Michael would have had.
I'm even like,
we're friends.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You invited me out. Hey.
Hey,
But
I'm out with you.
it's sad. It's super sad.
Damn, bro. And just imagine, he looks up, he see everybody's like, and he's asked for help, and nobody can truly help him.
Yeah.
That's sad.
In 2003, 27-year-old Kurt Smith was employed as an engineer for the German shipping company called Hapag-Lloyd. Over the past year, he had completed 2 separate 4-month-long deployments with this company, and he enjoyed the work enough that he asked for a contract extension. It was granted, and on July 11th of that year, he boarded the CM London Express to begin his 3rd deployment. 3 months into it, one of the ship's pistons broke. The piston is the part of the engine that goes up and down inside the hollow cylinder of the engine block. They would need to turn off the engine in order to make this repair, and so they made an unplanned stop in Savannah, Georgia. Once they got there, Kurt, along with 7 people under his command, headed down to the engine room to begin the process. Over the next several hours, the men were able to extract the broken piston and put in the new one. But this was back-breaking work. It was so hot in the engine room. What they're moving around is so heavy and cumbersome, and they're all bickering with each other. And at some point, Kurt called out the foreman for being lazy, and the foreman did not like that, and he was very popular amongst this group. And so by the end of getting the piston back in, everybody in there just totally resented Kurt. But ultimately, they got it done, and Kurt cut everybody loose except for the foreman. He told him he needed to stay back and help him ensure all the pistons were properly installed. To do that, they would need to go inside of something called the scavenger air receiver, which is this tube that's 55 feet long by 5 feet wide with access hatches on either side, and it sits right next to the engine block. Each hatch on either end had 3 latches on the outside that were called dogs. And so Kurt undid the 3 dogs on his hatch, and he opened it up. He crawled inside of the tube with his flashlight, and he began crawling. And on his left side were these square cutouts, these windows called scavenger ports that looked into each of the engine cylinders. And so Kurt crawled along counting the different cylinders until he got to the 6th one, which is where they had replaced that piston. Meanwhile, the foreman went around to the aft hatch. He undid the 3 dogs, he opened up the hatch, and then using a remote controlled device, he was able to bring the pistons into position safely so Kurt could inspect them through the scavenger port. The procedure on the ship was if you were inspecting one cylinder, the expectation is you would inspect all of them. And that entire process took about an hour, and Kurt just didn't feel like doing it. He was tired, he had a bad day, he was hungry. And so after he was certain the new piston was working just fine, he kind of rushed his checks on the other cylinders, and after only about 20 minutes, he told the foreman that, yep, we're good, we can leave. So he and the foreman got out, they dogged their hatches, and they headed up to their rooms to change. Their captain had been told they had to leave port no later than 9:30 that night because a huge tanker was coming in and there'd be no space for them. But at 8 p.m., as everyone is running around prepping the ship, somebody noticed Kurt was not at his workstation. The chief engineer called down to the engine room to ask anyone down there if they had seen Kurt, but nobody had. So a sailor was sent down to Kurt's cabin to see if he was in there, but he wasn't. At this point, because they only had about an hour until they were departing, they had to find Kurt. So they sounded the alarm on their ship, which was a little bit premature, but they figured, let's get everybody involved and just find Kurt. And so everybody stopped what they were doing and began searching the ship. During the search, a sailor was down near the scavenger air recovery space, and he noticed on the forward hatch there was a little piece of rag poking out of the top right corner of the forward hatch, and the lower 2 dogs were not set. He knew they were having issues getting a good seal on this particular hatch because there was a divot in one of the O-rings. And so he figured someone must have put a rag right over that divot to try to help seal this hatch, and they just forgot to shut the 2 lower dogs. Now, it did cross this sailor's mind that Kurt could have gotten inside of the scavenger air recovery space and then somehow got locked inside. And so he did want to investigate. However, there was a very strict policy about who was allowed to actually open up the scavenger air recovery hatches. And it wasn't the sailor. It was only the foreman, the chief engineer, and Kurt. And so this sailor...
Well, why don't we inform somebody that let's check this, and maybe I got this kind of feeling maybe he got locked in here. Let's check, but we don't know. We don't have a lot,
Bruh.
The story is
Every time
still
Mr.
unfolding.
Ballen's story, bruh.
The story
You
is
already
still unfolding.
know, bro.
But that would have been I would have been we need to check any and everything.
Especially when we just been working right here.
Yeah.
We never know. Kurt might have went back there to
Who
double
knows?
check something, and if he being like a supervisor over us, he, you know how they be a little cocky, and they just like, I don't need y'all. I can do it myself. I know these, Oh, fuck.
to play it safe and just close the lower two dogs, and then told his superior that there was this weird rag poking out of the forward hatch and that someone should go down there and open it up and see if Kurt's inside. And so his superior went and told the chief engineer. And so as the chief engineer is making his way down to check on this strange rag situation, the foreman completely independently had gone around to the back of the scavenger unit to the aft hatch, so not the one with the rag poking out of it, and he unlocked the three dogs. He opened the hatch, he looked inside and shined his light, didn't see anyone, shut the hatch, locked all three dogs, and then began to walk away right as the chief engineer came down and saw him. And he saw him securing the scavenger air unit, and he said, "Hey, I was just coming down here to check to make sure Kurt wasn't in there, and you just checked, right? He's not in there?" And the foreman said, "Yeah, no one's in there, it's all good." And so the two of them, the foreman and the chief engineer, did not check on the rag. They just left. The search for Kurt continued on the ship, but they could not find him. And so as 9:30 was approaching, the captain called the port authority and he said, "Hey, we're down someone. Can you please send someone out to look around?" And so a search on the land began, but they couldn't find Kurt. And so finally 9:30 came around and the big container ship that was supposed to come in and take their place was just waiting right out in the water for them to leave. And so the captain did his best to linger for another 10-15 minutes, but finally they were forced to leave even though they had no idea where Kurt was. So they fired up the engine and they left. The general consensus on the ship was that Kurt must have fallen overboard and drowned. Or maybe he ran ashore and ran off, but that was very unlike him. And so an investigation was launched, but it would probably be a while before anybody found out what happened to him. Finally, 2 days later, they arrived in port at Norfolk, Virginia. They powered off the engine and they got the ship ready to be put into harbor mode, where basically they open up all the hatches and they prep it to sit there for a while. And during that process, the foreman went down to the scavenger air recovery space and he opened up the forward hatch and he found Kurt. Although no one has all the details of what happened to Kurt, the leading theory is 2 days earlier when he had done that abbreviated check of the engine cylinders, when he had basically cut it short with the foreman because he just didn't want to do it, he had gotten back up to his room and started to think to himself that if anything goes wrong with any of those pistons, that I'm going to be to blame because the foreman was with me and I called the foreman lazy earlier and he doesn't like me, and so he's bound to turn me in. So Kurt decided he would go back down and do a more thorough check. But he didn't want anybody to know he was second guessing himself, and so he was going to do this alone, even though it was a huge no-no to go inside of the scavenger air unit by yourself. Because if you manage to get stuck in there by yourself, horrible things are going to happen to you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. But Kurt was confident, so he headed down, he undogged the forward hatch, he swung it inside, he climbed in with his flashlight, and then somehow, once he got inside, he managed to fall backwards and hit the hatch door so hard that it swung shut, slammed, causing the upper dog to swivel and rotate down and lock him inside. He knew that nobody knew he was in there. He had made sure that nobody knew he was in there. He screamed for help, but nobody could hear him. The ship was so loud as it was, and being inside of this tunnel, no sounds getting out of it. And so he's looking around thinking what he should do, and he looks back at the door, the one that's sealed right behind him, and he sees the very top crack, there's a tiny sliver of light. Because even though one dog had sealed him in, because the other two had not, there was a little gap in the seal. And so he thought if he can just wedge his dirty rag into that little space and push it out onto the other side, someone will see it, will clearly recognize there's a foreign object hanging off of the forward hatch, and they'll have to open it up and they'll find me. And so once he wedged his rag up and through, he was confident he would be found. And so he slouched down against the back of the hatch and he just sat there waiting to be found. And then a little while later, he heard the sound of somebody not opening the hatch behind him as he thought they would, but instead locking the two dogs, making sure it doesn't open. He must have got up and turned around and screamed for them, but again, they can't hear him. And then a couple of minutes later, on the other side of the tube, 55 feet away, the aft hatch opened up briefly. Somebody shined their light in. It didn't hit him. He tried to yell for them. They didn't hear him. And then he saw them shut the hatch and he heard the sound of them locking all three dogs. At this point, you got to figure that Kurt's fear is at a primal level. He knows at any moment, if somebody doesn't get him out of here, this is going to become a death trap. And so as he's looking around, just wondering what's going to happen, he would have felt the incredible pressure start to build up in his ears. It would have taken him to his knees, it would have been crushing in his skull, and he would have heard the sound of each of the hatches being pressed up against their O-ring as the room began to pressurize. And then he would have heard the sound of the pistons beginning to churn inside of the engine cylinder right next to him. And at that point, he would know there's no hope. And slowly, horribly, that room would begin to heat up until Kurt was cooked alive. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments what it is and where you found it.
Wow.
this the one, bro.
I'm
I regret
like,
doing this one though. And out of all the
don't
Mr.
know
Ballen
why this-
videos,
I don't know why this made me so like.
it kind of pissed me off.
Like, it made me mad. Like, it really did. I'm like, what?
And like he said, lazy. Like
What?
Kurt said, lazy, bro.
That is like really? Like, y'all know y'all not really like you check one or a couple and like, okay, yeah, we check. No
And
one
then,
down here.
oh, you check that side? Let me verify this side.
Someone needs
because
to
there's
like
something
be
right
verified.
here.
This is check. We check this one. We check this one. We check this one. Y'all had enough time to check.
I hate the fact that he went down there alone.
Yeah, I get it, but
I knew what it was.
Everyone, like, I second guess myself all the time. So I'm like, let me just double check, make sure. I don't want nobody to know, I don't want nobody to know, like, I got this, I don't need no help. I got it. Like, it just is what it is. That's just how, that's just how some people are. Like, I don't know. I get it, but like,
This one really real deal pissed me off.
like the fact that
because y'all could have saved
all
him.
you had to do before y'all took off, just
Double
make sure.
check everything.
Already the rag, like, he gave you some indication. It was already a little, that's not normal. So let's make sure we check this one most definitely.
And the fact that before we leave, let's make sure, because Kurt hasn't 100% verified that the Pistons are working.
Right? Oh, this one.
And we
kinda
was
like,
working on the Pistons.
This one kind of like. Really,
that's the reason why we
did
docked.
for me.
We docked because we were working on the Pistons. Kurt is missing. 9 times out of 10, boom, 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 common sense kick in.
You know what I'm saying?
If we can't find Kurt, last place Kurt was at was checking on the Pistons. Let's actually go inside this mug and verify multiple people. And we need people to stay outside, and just in case these heavy doors slam shut. I understand Kurt went in there by himself. To be real, even if they found him, he was gonna be in trouble, because why are you down here by yourself? But he was willing.
Yeah. Like, I don't know.
But like you said, the
This one did it
foreman
for me.
lazy.
Right.
He said that, and dudes, he knew they were lazy. They wouldn't even
half-assing, because that was a half-ass, But yeah, this one.
No.
And
I knew from the jump. I said, God, because none of these good, bro.
Yeah.
I hate it for the little boy. The 14-year-old boy gets stuck in the chimney, bro.
Yeah. And then Sean
by himself. And then Sean, man, bro, I don't think I'd do another top 3 places you can't go. People went anyways, because these are sad, bro.
Yeah, these are definitely sad. Like, definitely sad.
Man, I don't know. Hey, man, make sure y'all spam us up in the comments. Let us know y'all thoughts and opinions, man. I don't even got no thoughts or opinions on these.
Yeah.
These just fucking horrible, man. But as always, y'all know how it go. I do go by the name DJ the Kid. This is
Sierra Coast.
We are. We are, yo.
Go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack and flip for my foes. Dollar, 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 dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar, 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 dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money low.